Hello everyone, and welcome back to another card game tutorial video. In this video I will go over how to create randomly generated card packs. The card packs we are generating will be referred to as GACHA packs and will follow the GACHA mechanic. The GACHA mechanic was explained in an earlier video. If you're interested in the detail, be sure to check that out. The video will be linked in the description below. If you want to see more, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to help support this series, be sure to check out my Patreon, linked in the description below. We will start on the server end. What we want to happen is a client will request a pack from the server will generate a pack, and then the server will send the pack information to the client. In order to do that, we need to define our pools. The term pool refers to the available cards that can be received from a pack. We will define our pools within INI files. In order to create these INI files, we will write to them using a script. We will create two banners. A banner is synonymous with the term pool. The first banner will be a Blastoise banner. This banner will have cards other banners will not have, specifically the Squirtle evolution line, Gyarados and Magikarp, Chansey, and the Poliwrath evolution line. This banner will not have the banner-specific cards for other banners. So we will create that INI file using a script called init Blastoise pools. And in this script call, we're going to open up an INI file called Blastoise banner. Now, this file won't be on your computer, but as we write to it, GameMaker will create the file and store it in your local app data folder on your computer. So with that open, we're going to initialize a local variable called I, and this is so we can count how many cards we put to a specific category. Then we're going to write to the INI file what cards we want in what categories. So we're going to have 4 different categories. We're going to have a featured category for the rare cards, an unfeatured category for the other rare cards that aren't going to be featured on this banner, and then we're going to have the uncommon cards and then the common cards. So in the first category, we're going to write the card number of the card we want in this category, which we're going to call featured, and then we're going to write it to the position within this category, and that position will be the I value. And I will show you what this file will look like once we finish. So we're going to want to put all of the featured Pokemon cards here. And the featured rare cards will be Blastoise, Chansey, Gyarados, Poliwrath, and Dragonair. These are all rare cards. And then I also want to feature a few rare trainer cards, and that will be Pokemon Breeder and Pokemon Trader. And then the last thing we want to write to this category is the number of cards that are within that category. This is important for whenever we need to pull a random card, we need to know how many cards are in there so that we can choose a random value between 0 and the total. And then when it chooses a random value, it'll just choose one of these cards randomly. The next thing we want to do is we want to reinitialize our I to be 0, just so we can maintain the amount of unfeatured cards we are going to add to the INI file. So now we're going to add these cards in the same way, except the category will be called unfeatured. And then we will still write it to the position of I as we increment it. And then lastly will be the card number. So all of these cards are the rest of the rares that won't be featured on any other banner. And then we want to add the rest of the rare trainers. And then like last time, we want to write the total to the unfeatured category. We're going to reinitialize I to be 0. And now we're going to be working with the uncommon category. And then we're going to go down the line and add the uncommon cards. We know these are all uncommon cards because we're going to use the same rarity type that the trading card game uses. And then we want to add the uncommon trainer cards. And then there is one uncommon energy card. And then we want to add the uncommon total. Again, we're going to reinitialize I to be 0. We're going to write all of the common Pokemon cards to the common section of the INI file. Then the trainer cards. Followed by the energy cards. And then lastly the total. And then at the end of this, we want to close the INI file. So now if we go to our PC folder and we open up our C drive, we can go to our users folder, to the user, and app data, and local, and then we're going to find server because that's the name of this program. And then you're going to see after you start the server program, it will then write and create this INI file. And that will look like this. And as you can see, we have a featured category. We have a total of 7 cards written to it with a total of 7. Even though it says 6, when we generate a random number, it's going to choose a value between 0 and 6 using the iRandom function call. So don't let that alarm you. And then we have an unfeatured, an uncommon, and then a common, all with a total at the end of it. So the next script we want to create is going to be called init Charizard pools. Now we're going to follow the same format in this script call. We're going to open up an INI file called Charizard banner, which won't exist on your computer yet. We're going to initialize a local variable to be I. And then we're going to write all of the featured cards we want to the featured section. And with this section, we're going to have Charizard, Alakazam, Ninetales, Mewtwo, and Pidgeotto. Now one thing I didn't specify in here is you can see that I added the Squirtle evolution line here, but Charmander, Ninetales, and the Alakazam evolution line will not be here because we want the player to summon on these banners for specific cards. So now that we have the featured cards, we're going to do the unfeatured rares, followed by the trainers, then the uncommon cards, and lastly the uncommon cards. And we cannot forget to close the INI file at the end. So if you go back to your server folder and your local app data folder, you can see that now we have a new INI file with all of the categories we have created. So now when we generate a random pack, we have something to pool from. But now we need to create the script that will choose those cards at random. And we're going to call that script call base pack. So what this script is going to do is we're going to read a value at argument 0. And then depending on that value, we're going to pull from a specific section of the INI file that has been already open. So the way we're going to have our ratios for these banners is we're going to generate a random number between 1 and 10. Now if the value is either 8, 9, or 10, we're going to return a random common card from that INI file. And then if the number at argument 0 is between 2 and 7, we're going to return a random uncommon Pokemon card. That effectively gives a 90% chance of not pulling a rare. So then the last 10%, when the card is either, when pool is either 1 or 1.5, we're going to then return an unfeatured or featured card. So let's write this out. So if pool is greater than or equal to 8, we want to store the total value of common cards we have. So we're going to set this variable equal to the value in the common section of the INI file, and the variable will be called total. And then if that variable does not have a value, we want to return 0. So now in temp, we have the number of cards within that category. And then with that, we're going to return a random value within the INI file in the common section. And then in order to do that, we're going to pass it a string and then utilize irandom. And then we're going to pass that irandom function call the temp variable. And then if there's no value at that position, we're going to return a 0. So now this effectively returns a random Pokemon card number from the common section. And now we'll need to do this 3 more times for the other categories in our INI file. But since we've utilized this irandom function call, and this is going to be called within the server object, we want to add a randomized seed to this object. So this needs to be added to the server object. But now that we're back here, let's create a if statement for our uncommon cards. So if pool is greater than or equal to 2, we're going to store the total amount in our temp variable the same exact way, except it'll be in the uncommon section, and we want the variable called total. And then we're going to return a random value within the INI file in the uncommon section, and the variable name will be a random value between 0 and that temp value. Now that accounts for 90% of the possible cards you can pull from that pack. But then we want to create a 5% chance for our featured cards and a 5% chance for our unfeatured cards. So the way that we've done this is whenever we generate the random value that we pass to this function, it does a check. If that value is a 1 going into this script, it will create another condition that will choose a random number between 0 and 1. And if it is a 1, it will add 0.5 to the value that is going to go to argument 0. This will make sense once we get into that. But for a rare card, we'll either pass a 1 or a 1.5. So if pool is equal to 1, which will be an unfeatured card, we are going to read the total in the temp variable. And then we will return a random value in the INI file in that unfeatured category, like we did for the other ones. And then lastly, if pool is equal to 1.5, which is a featured card, we're going to do the exact same thing. So that's all we'll need to do for this script call. Now, the last thing we'll need to do is add a case in our server handle message script for when the client wants to request a pack from the server. So we'll need to create a new case called message multi-summon. But we have not initialized this macro yet. So let's do that before we continue. The value of this macro will be 20. So what the client is going to send to the server is going to be a banner value. So depending on whatever banner they select, the client will send us that banner ID, and we're going to read that with a buffer size of U8. And then we are going to create a new buffer to send back to the client. And we are going to write to it the message ID and the socket ID. And then, depending on the banner value, we will open up a different INI file. So, if the banner ID is 1, we know that they're summoning on the Blastoise banner. So we're going to open the Blastoise banner INI file. And if banner is equal to 2, we're going to open up the Charizard banner INI file. So this is how the script base pack knows what INI file to read from. So now we need to generate the pack, and we're going to do that with a for loop. And we're going to set a variable I to equal 0, and we're going to go through this loop a total of 9 times. The client will receive 10 cards, but the first 9 will be randomly generated between 1 and 10, but the last one will be a guaranteed rare card, so we want to do that one a little bit differently. So what we're going to do is we're going to call the iRandom script call to get a value between 0 and 9, and then we're going to add it to 1, so that value can be between 1 and 10. And then if that value is equal to 1, which means they are going to pull a rare card, we want to do another random generation to see if they're going to pull a featured or unfeatured card. Now, there's going to be an equal chance to pull either a featured or an unfeatured card. So what we're going to do is we're going to add to the temp value a random value between 0 and 1, and then we're going to divide it by 2. This is how the pool value in the base pack script call can be either 1 or 0. Because if this iRandom function call rolls a 0, 0 divided by 2 will keep this value to be 1. However, if it's equal to 1, 1 divided by 2 will be that 0.5 that gets added to the temp variable. So now that we have that, we are going to write to that buffer, and this will be a size of U16. And then what we're going to write to that buffer will be the script call base pack, and we're going to pass that value the temp variable. So now we have successfully generated the first 9 cards. But now the last one is going to be a guaranteed rare card. But we want to maintain that 5% featured rare pool. So in order to do that, we are going to reinitialize temp to be a random value between 1 and 100. So we're going to do iRandom, and we're going to pass it 99, and then add 1 to it, just so it can be a random value between 1 and 100 instead of 0 to 99. So in order to maintain that 5% ratio, if temp is less than or equal to 5, we're going to set temp to equal 0.5. And then if it's not, we're going to set temp to equal 0. Then we're going to write to the buffer the last card, which will be the same size, except we're going to write it base pack, and we're going to pass that script call the temp value plus 1, just so we can guarantee that it's going to be passed a 1 or a 1.5. And then lastly, we want to close the INI file. And now that we have that, we can send that buffer back to the client. So this is all we will need to do for the server. So now let's jump to the card game program. The first thing we want to do in this program is we want to add the new sprites. So we're going to be adding a total of 7 new sprites. And you can find all of these sprites in a Google Doc linked in the description below. If it's not there, the last place you can check will be on my Twitter. So the first sprite we're going to create is going to be called Sprite Pack Opening. And we're going to justify this to the middle center. And then we're also going to increase this size by 2. The next sprite we're going to create is going to be called SPR_Blastoise banner. And this will be the banner that represents the Blastoise banner. And we're going to justify that to the middle center. And the next one will be the Charizard banner. Now we're going to want to justify this differently. So the origin will be 137 by 41. And then we're going to lock that in place. The next sprite will be the Blastoise pack. And that will look just like the pack we would pull from the original base set box. And we're going to justify that to the middle center. And then the next 3 will be for the Charizard and Venusaur packs. Now, even though we're not going to go over a Venusaur banner, feel free to create one on your own and let me know what you put in that banner. Now, the last sprite we're going to create is going to be called SPR Base Box. And this will just to be in the background of our new room. So what we're going to do, for whenever we decide to open packs, we're going to create a new room for that. So this room will be the same size of all of the others, which will be 640 by 807. And then we're going to want to set the background to the menu tile, and we're going to stretch that. And then I want to create a new background that will be under the old one. And I'm going to call this box, because this will have the sprite of the new box we just created or uploaded. And this would actually be above the old one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset this here by 100 in the X direction and 250 in the Y direction. So now we have created this room. But now we need to create a way to get to this room. So we need to create a path to this room. And we're going to do that with an object called obj path to pack opening, just to keep it simple. And we're going to add the sprite that we just uploaded called pack openings, or pack opening. And the only event that this will have will be a mouse left released event. And within this event, we're going to request to join the server, because in order to receive these cards, we have to get it from the server. So if a client object does not exist, we want to create one. In our instances layer. And then with that client, if we have connected to the server, we want to go to room 3. And then if we haven't, we want to set the alarm 0 to equal 20. And that's all we will need to do for that. But now we need to put it in the room 1. And since we don't use this options yet, we're just going to add this object right above it. I'm going to take this grid off just so I can cover it perfectly. Perfect. So now that we have that, that should allow us to go to the next room. So in order to test that, let us load the server we have just updated. And let's load our new card game program. So as you can see, we now have this new selection called Pack Opening. And if I click on it, it says could not connect to server. And then now if I start the server, it gives us this error that says that the client is trying to read from outside the buffer. But you can see that we've actually connected to the server already. So this is happening in a message after we've connected. So what the problem is before, when we connected to the server, we only connected as a player looking to battle another player. So we had this case in our server that said message join, and then it will return information back to the client. But now we don't need that. So when we attempt to connect to the server in this client connect script, we have this message and sent it to the server. Whenever we connected to the server, we sent the server this message. But this no longer needs to be here. So we're going to remove that, just so whenever we connect to the server to open some packs, we don't have to deal with that. But we still need that for whenever we need a turn value. So we have to place that somewhere else, and that is going to be in our menu object in this step event. We're going to add that in this condition where step is equal to 1. And whenever we choose step 1, we are connecting to the server for the purpose of battling an opponent. So what we're going to put here is, with the client object, we are going to write that message that we just removed. But as you can see, we've already used this same condition right here. So what we can do is we can paste this message creation here, remove these comments, and then create an else statement that is the exact same. And then we can remove all of this. So now that we have this here, we should be able to connect to the server without the game crashing. So now if we select pack opening, we've connected to the server, and now we're in this empty room. So now let's fill this in with banners that we can select. So the next thing we need to create is a new object that we're going to call object packs. Now this object will show the cards that we have pulled from the server. So the first thing we want to do is create a create event. And what will be in here will be the initialization of the sprite arrays, and then we also want to initialize the big sprite arrays, we want to create a packs array that can store 10 cards. We're going to create a variable called J that I will explain later. And then we're going to set a pack sprite array that will be equal to no one. Or a pack sprite variable. This variable will tell the program what pack to display, whether that's Blastoise pack, Charizard pack, or the Venusaur pack. And then we want to create a global variable called generate, and we're going to set that equal to true. If this variable is equal to true, it will allow us to request a pack from the server. If it's false, it won't. So whenever we have a pack that we need to sift through, we don't want the player to generate another pack. So the next thing we're going to create is a step event. And in this step event, if the mouse button is released and the J value is less than 9, we want to increment J. Now J will represent what number of cards we've sifted through already. Then we're going to have a condition that says if J is equal to 0, the pack sprite will equal no one. And then if J is equal to 10, the global generate value will equal true. So I'll explain these later in the video. The next thing we want to do is create a draw event. And in this draw event, we are going to show the pack of cards in using the big sprites, the small sprites, and then we're going to show all of the cards that we've drawn and sent to the INI file. So whenever we write texts, I want them to be centered. I want them to be aligned in the center. So that's why I've added this line here. And then I want everything to be drawn in black. So the first thing I want to do is I want to draw all of the cards that are in the pack that we've received from the server. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw those in 2 lines. So we're going to draw the first 5, and we're going to set their X and Y coordinates equal to this. So this is the best position that I found for them. And then the second line of cards will be drawn at these X and Y positions. And these positions will be dependent on I. So the next thing we want to do is we want to draw the pack sprite in the center of the field whenever J is equal to -1. When the server sends us a pack of cards, it's going to set this J variable equal to -1 so that this object knows to print out this sprite. And at the same time setting this variable equal to -1, it will also set the pack sprite equal to the appropriate card pack. So then whenever we select and J is equal to 0, we're going to set the pack sprite equal to no one, which means we won't draw this anymore. And then we're going to begin to sift through the cards in the pack. And we're going to draw that like this. So using a for loop, we're going to draw all the cards in order in the center of the field in the same place that we drew the pack sprite. And we'll only be able to see the card if the J variable matches the I variable or position in the pack. So as we click our mouse, J will increment. And as J increments, it will allow us to sift through this pack. So now when J is equal to 10, it's going to set the global generate variable equal to true. Whenever the server sends us a pack in the client handled message script call, this will be set to false. So whenever J makes its way back to 10, we will set it back to true. Now the last thing I want to draw will be the catalog that we maintain in our Game1 INI file. Whenever we receive a card pack from the server in the client handled message script, we're going to update the amount of cards that we have of that specific card we pulled. and that will be done in the client handle message script, but I want to print that out. So I'll be using this to see that, and this will make more sense once we get into the client handle message script. So copy this over. What's going to happen is we're going to draw every number in red at these positions, and then for each featured card in the Blastoise banner, we're going to write that as black, just so we can easily see which card is featured and which card is not. So one more thing we want to do before we get in the client handled message script is create a new object we are going to call object banner. And within this banner, we're going to have two events, a left released event and then a right down event for whenever we want to test it quickly. So in the left released event, we're going to say if the global generate value is false, we want to return. So we don't want the player to be able to generate another pack. And then if the banner value for this object is equal to 1, which we have not created yet, we'll go over that in just a minute, we're going to set the pack sprite variable equal to the sprite of the Blastoise pack. And then if the banner value is equal to 2, which is a Charizard banner, we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to set this variable equal to the Charizard pack. And then we're going to do the same for Venusaur if banner is equal to 3. So now that we have that, we now need to generate the message to the server. So that message will look like this. We're going to write to it the multi-summon macro, and then we're going to pass it the banner that we're pulling from, and then we're going to send it to the server. And that's all we will need to do. Now in the write down event that will be here just for testing, it's going to be the exact same, except it's going to override the global generate variable. But before we move on, let's create this macro in our client object. So now that we have that, if you recall, we did not set this value for our banner object. That's because we're not going to do this in a create event like we would typically do. What we're going to do is we're going to go to room 3, and we're going to add the packs object in the instances layer, which can be set anywhere. And then we're going to add 2 banner objects. And this object will be at 160.96, and the second one will be at 480.96. So these are the 2 banners we will summon from. So if you double click one and you go to creation code, I want their create events to be different. So I'm going to set the first one to have a sprite index equal to SPR Blastoise banner. And then I'm going to set this banner value equal to 1. And then we're going to do the same thing for this one, except the banner value will be 2, and the banner will be that of Charizard. So now we have all that we need for that, and the last thing we need to do is create a case in our client handled message script. So if we go all the way down, we're going to create the case for message multi-summon. And what we're going to do is with our packs object, we're going to open up Game 1. And then in a for loop for I is equal to 0 and I is less than 10, because we're receiving 10 card numbers, I++, we are going to read the value in a temp variable, and we're going to set that equal to buffer read, the buffer size of U16. And then we're going to set the pack array at position I to equal the temp variable. And then we're going to reinitialize the temp variable to be a real value that is going to be read from the card section of the Game1 INI file at the position of the card number, which is pack at position I. And then if there isn't a value there, it's going to return a 0. And then we're going to add that value by 1. So if we read how many cards we have of this card number, and there isn't a card number there, it's going to return a 0. If there is a card number there, it's going to return that value. So whatever value returns, we're going to add it to 1. And then we're going to write to that INI file at that same position that new value, temp. So we've effectively increased the number of cards we have of that card by 1. Then we want to close the INI file. We want to set that J variable equal to -1, and then we want to set the global generate variable equal to false. And that's all we will need to do. So before we test this, I want to go back to this PC and find the card game folder so I can delete Game 1. Just so we can see it write to this folder. So as you can see, in this folder there is no INI file for Game 1, but when I select pack opening, it says that we did not initialize the pack variable in the draw event. So let's see what happened there. So we initialized it as packs instead of pack. So now that we have that, let's rerun our program. So now when I select pack opening, you'll see that we are reading zeros because there's no file here. And this is where that file will be created. So now let's re-enter this folder. And since we have not written anything, this has not been created yet. But now let's try to generate a pack by selecting this banner right here. As you can see, when I selected it, we got a Blastoise pack. We have created a new INI file, and these are all of the cards we have. And then we can see of all of these featured cards, which are black, we have pulled none of them, and we have pulled all of these cards. Now we're guaranteed one rare card, and it looks like we've pulled 2 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So even though that this card right here is a featured card, we only blackened the featured cards that were Pokemon cards. So we did pull 1 featured card and then 1 other rare card, which was Magneton. But as you can see, I cannot regenerate another pack until I go through all of these cards. And as I summon this IMI file will be continuously updated. But now let's try to overclock our server and hold down the right down mouse button above this banner. As you can see, we're generating a lot of card packs. And if you look here, there are a few cards we are not pulling. And that's because these cards are going to be featured on other banners. So now that we have that, let's try to see if one of these zeros can turn into a 1 by pulling from a different banner. As you can see, they start to count up. So that's all I wanted to go over in this video. If you enjoy the series and want to see more, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to help support this series, be sure to check out my Patreon linked in the description below. Until next time.